Hello, and welcome back to Book and Page. Chapter 14 of The Hobbit. Ready and raring to go. Let's kill a dragon. Okay, so the chapter's name is Fire and Water because we have a dragon and, of course, Lake Town. So we've transported ourselves back through space and time. Space-wise to Lake Town. Time-wise, we're about 2 days before this last chapter. So we're back to when, like, Smaug took down the tunnel the dwarves are in and then flew off for Lake Town. So we got some guards noticing, hey, there's lights on the mountain again. King under the mountain smithing. He's gonna send gold soon. Look, there's gold coming down the river. Except there's one guy, his name's Bard, who's just like, King under the mountain's a dragon. That there would be Smaug coming. And guess what? It is Smaug coming! Lake Town is now under attack. And everything is burning. So some people try and fight. Mostly they realize that, like, they're doomed and hit the water. And Smaug is like, this is gonna be fun because I'm gonna hunt them all. Yay! Except Bard. Bard is literally standing on a floating, burning city, shooting a bow at a circling, attacking dragon. And then the thrush appears, and the thrush is like, oh hey Bard. Yeah, no, you understand me, it's fine. There's a section missing from the dragon's diamond waistcoat. Nice little good place to aim your arrow. Kill the dragon. And Bard's like, obviously I can trust this bird. I didn't realize that could talk to me. And he notices there is in fact a spot missing. So he pulls out what he calls his black arrow. And it's the final arrow he has left, and apparently it's been passed down through his family. He's always retrieved it after he's used it, and it has never failed to hit the target he's aiming for. So, bing! And Smaug is no more. But of course he's dead in the air, so what happens, Smaug drops down and takes out the rest of the town. Like, dragon on top of them, done. And so everyone's like, oh my god, Bard killed the dragon, and the dragon killed Bard. But wait! Bard is not dead, Bard shows back up. And they want to make him king. Everyone's decided King Bard is a really good idea, except the Master of Lake Town, who is very quick to be like, why are you praising Bard? You should be mad at the dwarves. Let Bard be king of Dale. Be bad at the dwarves, so everybody is, and Bard is just like, King of the Dale might be a good idea. Except everyone is homeless and starving. And people are still dying. So, in fact, most of Lake Town probably would have died, except, wouldn't you know, the Wood King and his elves had heard about things happening in the mountain, and had started towards the mountain at that point. Bard's men show up and they're just like, hey, we killed the dragon and dragon's still effectively killing us. And good on the elves, they turn and come help the people of Lake Town. And in fact the Wood King and Bard agree that they're going to take some good men and head for the mountain because they're assuming there's a bunch of treasure there, now unguarded, because obviously the dwarves are dead, because Smaug would have killed them first. I mean, not quite. But they're not aware of that. Okay, so... the dragon is dead. Long live the dragon. Yep. Let's address that first part first, which is the dragon is dead. I mean, yes, we killed the dragon. That weak spot certainly came in handy, and it was a good thing that Thorin stopped Bilbo from chasing the thrush away, or all of this really would have gone south. But I think we got to address the first big question first. Who the is Bard, and how did he just kill a dragon? Like, literally, Bard gets named in this chapter, and then proceeds to do, like, the most heroic single act of the entire book. Like, if we can name anybody warrior with a capital W, it's the guy that literally just shot down a dragon. Who only gets named in this chapter? I mean, he possibly got mentioned before. He might have been the captain of the guards that got mentioned, because he's named as a captain of the archers here. But that's... like, Bard just seems to come out of nowhere and kills dragon. Now, I think Tolkien tries to make up for some of this. He does give us a bit of history, and we find out that Bard is a descendant of the last king of Dale. So he's got that royal lineage that we noted the people really liked in Thorin, who was a descendant of the kings under the mountain. And we've also got a bit of a personal history here, because it's noted that the people of Lake Town knew of his worth and courage, and that he was super duper pessimistic. So, like, we kind of know him. Like, he's a good person, if a downer at parties. But he literally just killed a dragon! You'd think after this entire book and this entire adventure and building up Smaug that, like, maybe one of the dwarves of the company would do it? Nope! It's Bard of Lake Town. Why? Well, I think there's a few things that we could argue here. Part of it, I think, is, again, maybe the dwarves couldn't achieve this because they themselves are too greedy. Like, there's too much vice among the dwarves to kill a dragon. And Bilbo probably wasn't going to achieve it because Bilbo is a hobbit. So, like, not a warrior species, prefers to grow things. I mean, we know he's capable of, like, killing things, because he killed a lot of those gigantic spiders. Some with stones. But instead we get Bard. And as I thought about this, I realized something. Bard's the other representation of the other group that lost everything to Smaug. The Lonely Mountain was utterly destroyed and gutted, and the dwarves died, but so too was Dale and the men. So Bard is actually a foil to Thorin in this moment. As the descendants of the people that once ruled these places, that they lost, and lost a lot, when Smaug came. But then we can pick up some differences. Thorin took his remaining people and went far away. Way far away. Past the Misty Mountains, over to the Blue Mountains, all the way over there. Where did Bard's family go? Literally to Long Lake, still in view of the mountain. And that would have been the people that had been present for the fall of Dale. You could say, of course, Thorin went that way. Thorin saw what happened with the dragon, and he went that way. Bard wasn't there, but assumably, like, his descendants didn't head off into the great wild yonder, and then Bard came back at some point. No, in all likelihood, they just came and set up Lake Town. They stayed in the shadow of the thing that had destroyed them. And maybe in that way they actually kept the history of it a lot more alive than all the dwarves who were way over there in the Blue Mountains, who went through notably a lot more, because there's the Battle for Moria in between. So, like, Bard is very directly still connected with the mountain, even despite the fact that he wasn't there for its destruction. So what we actually see is the two groups helping each other. Smaug is pushed out of the mountain itself by a dwarven descendant, and his people, his group, the company, are the things that actually pushed Smaug out of the mountain. Bard couldn't have killed Smaug if Smaug hadn't come to Lake Town. So Thorin and his people push Smaug out, and Bard kills him. And notably does it with an arrow that represents both groups, with a tool that combines the suffering of both groups. Because the black arrow was made by the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. It was made by the dwarves and cared for by Bard and his family, cared for by the men, to the point where they reclaimed it every time they used it and passed it down through their family line. So while Bard seems to be out of nowhere, he's actually the culmination of these two cities that were destroyed. And most notably, he kills Smaug to protect his people. He's not thinking about the treasure of the mountain until after Smaug is already dead. He was never drawn to the mountain. Smaug came to him, and he had to act. So the fact that he was not greedy, and the fact that he was a culmination of these two groups, Bard kills the dragon. Bard kills the dragon. The dragon is dead. How does that phrase continue? Long live the dragon. Okay, let's talk about some replacement dragons. So, we already know there is a concern about the dwarves from the last chapter and gold sickness, but we can add to our number here. So, we've also got Bard as somebody we have to keep an eye on, because a restored Dale actually sounds really good to him, but he's not the worst out of the group, because he gets the idea in his head and then looks around, realizes his people are suffering and starving, and goes to help those people first. Immediately. Same too, we can argue, with the Wood King who's shown up. The elves were heading for the mountain to take the treasure, because the dwarves are probably dead, and Smaug is now dead. Which really could set the Wood King up as, like, Smaug's replacement here, because he wasn't willing to help at all in this adventure. He did nothing to kill Smaug, that's Bard, but he also didn't help the dwarves and Bilbo. In fact, he refused them help. They were starving, and he refused them help until they were locked prisoners in his palace, and then he kind of fed them. Which is weird, because the moment Bard's men show up and say, please, like, we are going to die of starvation, the Wood King doesn't hesitate. He goes to help the people of Lake Town, which undercuts that draconian aspect to him. But it certainly points that he's probably, like, racist towards the dwarves, because he's willing to help the men, no questions asked, but not the dwarves. And he's willing to think that the men honestly need help, but is more willing to think that the dwarves are trying to attack his people rather than asking for food. So he might not be a dragon, but he's still a bit of a dick. Like, probably a super dick if you're dwarvish. Probably a little racist towards you. So where are we seeing the most draconian aspect showing up following Smaug's death? The Master of Lake Town. If you remember, when we spoke about Smaug first showing up, I called him a politician. He has that way of talking that makes him seem more trustworthy by making everybody else seem untrustworthy. Master of Lake Town. Literally, the people are calling for Bard to be king, and the Master of Lake Town somehow says, hey, praising Bard for acting properly and killing the dragon is basically blaming me for bringing the dragon onto you, and that in fact is the dwarves' fault. So ignore Bard and be angry at the dwarves. Well, no, those are two different things. The people could still be happy that Bard killed the dragon and want him to be king, because it is an elected position for them, or at least the Master of Lake Town is. And you could still be mad at the dwarves. Those are not mutually exclusive here. But Master is forcing it to be mutually exclusive. Because if you praise Bard, you're blaming me, and you should be blaming the dwarves. And it's not even just that. The dwarves do have fault here. And if they're honestly good people, then they need to acknowledge that fault and help do something. So I have no problem with the people of Lake Town who literally just lost everything in a burning fire and have had people dying and people who will continue to die because of exposure and lack of supplies for being mad at the dwarves. But the issue is that the Master of Lake Town doesn't follow this up with any positive actions. Bard is actually the one that tells people to calm down and say, well, the dwarves probably suffered too. I doubt they survived. And he follows that up with going to help the people. How does the Master of Lake Town follow his speech about blame the dwarves and ignore Bard? By sitting down and demanding someone bring food and fire. Literally, there are people dying. Your people are dying. You think they might need food and fire a little more than you do? But he doesn't care. He has a position of power that he wants to keep, and he's going to use that power for his own advantage, and not for helping anybody else out. And the other thing we do have to acknowledge is that it's the Master of Lake Town that actually put the idea of a restored Vale in Bard's head. Bard didn't seem to have any thought about the treasure or using it for restored Vale until the Master of Lake Town mentioned it. As I've said before in this series, greedy people don't like other greedy people. But it should be acknowledged that greedy people have a tendency to create other greedy people. Dragons, even in death, tend to create more dragons. And the fact that a couple people are really starting to show some draconian aspects is really concerning. Before we had Smaug, the single dragon, but now that he's dead, we have potentially 13 already in the mountain, 14 if you count how Bilbo is treating himself around the Arkenstone. Bard, the Wood King, the Master of Lake Town. We ended up with far more dragons than we started with. The dragon is dead. Long live the dragon. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.